5 minutes after 8 o'clock right here on Morning Express, and it's time for us now to look at other things, but still the effects of COVID on us. Now, currently, there's a report that is out that shows that the sadness index for Kenya is at its highest. And just recently, we had the Ministry of Health release a report which counselors and psychologists felt may not have been very fair for them by virtue of the fact that they were left out in terms of that task force, but also where do they fit in regards to ensuring that Kenya remains mentally and psychologically sane. So to have this conversation, I'm joined by Moffat Kago via video link, and Moffat is a psychologist and also the director of ProCare. He's a counselor and member of the Kenya Counseling and Psychological Association. Thank you for joining us, Moffat.
Thank you, Mike.
We're also joined by Lois Okello, who is also a psychologist, also a member of the Kenya Counseling and Psychological Association. Thank you for joining us, Lois. I'll start with you, Moffat. I know you did give a press briefing yesterday, and part of the concerns that you were raising was the fact that psychologists had been left out of the task force, but also out of the report. Maybe you can just bring us up to speed with what your main concerns were.
Thank you very much, Mike, and say a very good morning to the viewers. Now, on the onset, I think it was very important for us to start moving with the understanding that this should be a collaborative effort. It should be a multi-dimensional effort. And for that reason, the reason why we felt like something better should have been done is because the issues that Kenyans are going through at the moment, you will agree with me that they are not issues that require medical or even psychiatric intervention at the onset. However, I must say that where the task force began, we highly appreciate, because that is the very first step. Mm-hmm. But then we felt that something better should have been done. And we agree, and I also want to state it very clearly, that this is actually not a competition of any nature, mm-hmm. but the fact that we felt that if psychologists were involved in it, from the onset, they are the ones who are on the grassroots and they know what the common person goes through, because we are all over the country.
All right, and maybe just for the benefit of somebody who may not clearly know the difference and differentiate between a psychiatrist and a psychologist, maybe just very briefly make it clear what the difference is so that we're on the same page.
Thank you very much. A psychiatrist, Mike, is a doctor, meaning that he can, their work is to assess. Hello?
Yeah, go on. I can hear you.
Yes, meaning that their work is to assess the psychological, or rather the mental state of a person. Mm-hmm. And their intervention is mostly, goes the path of drugs, right. Prescription of drugs and stuff like that. But then we are saying that the challenges that Kenyans are facing at the moment, they do not require that intervention. The primary person here is the counselor and psychologist, whose work is to assess the psychological state of a person, the emotional state of a person, and the social state of a person. Right. Because these are the many phases and factors that need to be considered. But we felt like they were left out, mm-hmm. and we are saying...
Okay, allow me to bring in Lois. I got the difference there between the two. Lois Okello, who is also a psychologist. Do you agree that you feel psychologists may have been left out of this conversation, particularly when trying to deal with the pandemic COVID-19?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I really want to concur with my colleague who is talking about the psychologists and counselors being left out. And the reason being that they are very key areas of the report and that the task force has given, and they're basically focusing on the infrastructure, which is really in a bad state. You know, the physical infrastructure in the different institutions in different counties, but we are aware as Kenya Counseling and Psychological Association that we have a counselor in every community and in every county in this nation. And all we need is basically to mobilize them and maybe facilitate them with this, maybe the limited resources that we have, so that they can be able to reach out. And I think Moffat has brought it out clearly again that, you know, there are primary issues that then lead to mental disorders that then makes the psychiatrist now prescribe medication. But if this person was able to access a counselor or a psychologist, maybe the issue that causes them that depression or that anxiety or panic attack would have been sorted out.
Okay. Yeah. And in your opinion, why do you think this glaring, you know, why one would imagine that they should have been included, particularly now that you already even have an association? Why do you think that they were left out?
I think one of the challenges that we are having with the whole concept of psychology and psychological and counseling services is the very fact that there was an act of Parliament that was passed in 2014, but up to and including now to date, it has not been implemented. And that's basically for the government. And then we were housed now in the Ministry of Health. So that bill was to be implemented through the Ministry of Health. And that has been a challenge with the, you know, the issues that have been going on with the health universal health provision in this nation. So it's been a journey that we've walked. It's been something that we've really struggled to have someone pick up that bill, implement it, and then put us on a platform where we have resources, we have and we can be able to give licenses to professionals to practice, and not just anybody coming up and claiming to be a counselor.
All right, Kago, your thoughts on why this why psychologists may have been left out in the task force, and more so the report that came out, and of course this was one of the reasons why you were raising, you know, a red flag.
Yes, I want to agree with my colleague Lois in that I think the greatest problem is the infrastructure part of it. Probably I feel like to some extent we jumped the gun, and we were not able to protect our patients, or, you know, our clients who are going through this crisis, in that the ground is still very open for anyone to come and you know, begin to offer what they will call, quote unquote, counseling, which is our greatest undoing. And therefore, I think if counselors and psychologists were involved from the word go, I think this would have really been very key for all of us, and for the best interest of Kenyans, because we have seen, even both in print and electronic media, whereby, you know, someone whose even credentials cannot be ascertained, they will come out and begin to claim that they are counselors, and by the end of the day, they tend to do more harm than good. Let me give you an example. People have been misled in so many ways. Issues of addiction, sexual addiction. You will hear some people advising some young people that it is okay to watch pornography so that you can be, you know, a good man, a good woman, and stuff like that. You know, these are some of the things that we really need to arrest, and that can only be done if we are able to harmonize what my colleague has said,
okay,
you know, implementation of that bill.
All right, Lois, maybe an area that we also need to explore and ask ourselves, because right now we have seen churches being reopened and people go back, and we do view religious leaders particularly as counselors or psychologists who help out, particularly at this time when we are having a very high sadness index. Do you think they qualify, or how does one determine, you know, which religious leader to go to for psychological help?
I think, Mike, those two entities have their own roles, and they also have their own purpose. Interesting to note that I'm also an ordained priest, but more trained in psychological counseling, and that, you know, we have a training, certification, and even practice, supervision, and internship and practicum that a counselor and a psychologist is taken through. Now, we have a pastor, and what they majorly deal on is the spirituality of people, which is a very key component. But we also know that a number of the spiritual issues are the ones that are indeed causing even the psychological problems that we're dealing with. So it's very important to really draw that line about spirituality and also psychological counseling. So as we speak now, our concern as psychologists in this country is that anybody passes for a counselor. So anyone, even who is giving some advice or giving their own opinion, actually puts it as counseling. We have a lot of these people who have gone through the hands of certain religious leaders in the name of counseling, and yet they have been maybe taken through some processes that we are not quite sure, you know, is related to counseling.
All right, and Kago, maybe to weigh in on that, religious leaders, and not just religious leaders, sometimes we even go to our relatives and friends for advice and help, and sometimes they double up as counselors and possibly may mislead in some cases. How do we handle that?
Thank you. What we are saying, and I think this is what was captured even in our press briefing yesterday, is that everybody has got his or her place. Talk of a psychiatrist, we are not trying to push them out. They are very important because there are some issues that even us as psychologists and counselors, we realize that they need to be pushed to the relevant professional. So what we are saying is that even religious leaders in our religious circles, they are also very, very important because this is the first place where people run to because they do not know any other person. But it is very, very important for us to raise this awareness that in as much as we also do have religious counseling or spirituality or spiritual counseling, it may not be able to handle some of these issues. Let me give you an example, Mike. I have heard cases and issues being reported to me whereby somebody is in church and they have some psychological issues, they have some psychiatric issues, and what is the first thing that the members of the church or even the pastors and the clergies will say because of lack of this relevant training? They will begin to say that this is demonic attack. Let me give you another example. I also saw the recent case in Naivasha where somebody murdered children. We don't want to dwell on that so much because it is in court. But the fact is, if you are able to look at even that particular perpetrator, you are able to, there's more than meets the eye. And this is an area that actually needs to be explored, even in our justice system, that we really need to have counselors in place so that they can assess, because when psychiatrists assess somebody's mental wellness or mental state, and they say they are not fit to start trial, what happens? Sometimes I have been involved in counseling prisoners. And I can tell you, Mike, there are some people that we have in our prisons who really needed to go through counseling even before their judgment was issued.
All right.
Yes.
And all right. Lois, maybe not to dwell so much on just the counselors stroke psychologists. We do have a situation in our country right now, and not just our country, it's world over, by COVID-19. We have people who are losing their jobs. There are others who are at home unexpectedly. There are some who've lost loved ones. There's so much happening. And according to this report, the sadness index for Kenya is at its highest right now. What are your comments to that, and how do we handle this so that as even we are helping each other, we know what case are we taking to a psychiatrist, which one do we need a psychologist, which one do we take to church, which one do I take to my uncle who is a senior in our family and has had experience in some of these things?
I think right now, like you rightly put it, we are in a place where people are losing hope. We are getting into a space where there's so much sense of hopelessness, because I think the situation is actually getting worse, and we know for sure that we are getting to a time when the infections are also going to go high. And a lot of families have really had to deal with issues of anxiety, with issues of not even being able to provide, the medical care that is required. Now, we know for sure that the religious places, and I want to emphasize that we are really not on a lockdown, but we are on a restriction access to various services. And I still want to urge people, at such a time when maybe there's restriction and maybe there is people are not able to access certain resources, anyone who is able to listen to someone and just be able to understand what they are saying and what their situation are can be able to lift someone's hope, or even just make them get to know that someone cares. But if it is possible, and we know that we have our persons on the ground, we have religious persons on the ground, we have people who have more experience or older, or people who have just the ability to listen, we have them on the ground. And we are urging people, if you've lost your loved one, you have lost your job, you have maybe you have a family member who is unwell, please do take time and just have somebody listen to you and understand what you're going through, and most probably you can be able to reach out to a counselor.
All right, and okay, Kago, your advice to Kenyans generally, because sometimes it's difficult to know which case requires what kind of help.
Thank you very much. We must agree that this time is it's a very difficult time for everyone in our country. And this is a time, Mike, whereby we are having very many different phases of loss. Loss of business, loss of family relationships, loss of so many things. And the worst of it is when a family loses their loved ones in this particular moment, whereby, as Africans, we are hot climate catchers, whereby we run towards each other in times of crisis. Right now, that is not the case. There is restriction of even the number of people who are supposed to come and grieve and mourn with you. Therefore, I would wish to say that it is expected that the feeling of loss, the feeling of hopelessness is really likely to skyrocket. But what I want to say and to advise Kenyans is that it is important to make best use of your resources, the social resources that you have around yourself. Like now, for example, if we take even the cases of people who are even killing their children, it would have been different. And I heard someone saying, in the news, I wish this person came to me. And I wish he or she told me what she was going through. And I believe that particular person was not a counselor, was not a psychiatrist. So the reason why we have coexistence is so that we can make best use of them, so that when somebody is going through pain or a feeling of being overwhelmed, they are able to go to those people. So we want to advise Kenyans to start from where they are, to speak out. Tell your neighbor, tell your significant other how you are feeling. It may be your pastor, it may be your friend, whoever it is, because peer counseling is also very important at this particular moment. And then those people are able to take you to the relevant people. Probably they are able to be very objective and tell you, you need to see a counselor. You need to seek for professional help. And when they come to us, we are again able to advise them and tell them, probably this case, the way the level it has reached, you need to see a psychiatrist because you didn't need some medication and stuff like that. And I think this is the point that we are trying to raise, that it has to be, this is an issue that needs to be approached from a multi-dimension point of view, because psychiatrists have their place, doctors have their place, our religious leaders have their place. That is my take.
All right, Los, your word of advice to general public on where to start. We are in unprecedented times, and sometimes we may not even realize ourselves that we need help. We may just be feeling anxious, and you're told it's normal because, these are the times that we're in. We may be feeling a bit nervous about things here and there. How does one even know that they require help?
I want to put it maybe in the simplest way possible. If at any one point in time there are certain changes that have happened, you're not able to sleep well, you're not able to eat well, you get moments where you go blank, and you are also not able, because if you're eating and sleeping and also doing all these other social activities, and you're not even able perhaps to, go to the toilet, the biological, the biological functions, like going to the toilet, you're not doing that. It is a problem. Then it is important that you speak to someone, and particularly we know in most of our communities we are able to reach to someone who is significant to us, just like Moffat has said. Now, many times when people have gone through losses at this point in time, we tend to think that there is a lockdown and we cannot even be able to talk to someone. If you're not able to speak to that person physically, please make a call or just reach out, because it is a very difficult time and everyone is experiencing very overwhelming issues and circumstances of life. So just have the courage to speak out. The moment you speak to somebody, they will definitely maybe give you certain directions, because we are now sending out information, and we are also grateful that the religious institutions are now being opened up, and just be able to speak to somebody.
Speak to somebody.
Yeah,
all right,
Kago,
in cases where you possibly have a relative, a friend, somebody who you know, and maybe does not know they require help, how do I identify that they need help and help them out? Because sometimes we have a stigma attached to mental illness or mental cases where if you advise somebody to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist, they're likely to tell you, I'm not crazy, or, how do you deal with it?
Thank you for raising that point, Mike, because the first thing, and this is what we are even emphasizing even to our government and even the task force that was assigned this work, is actually to start destigmatizing the issue of mental health. Looking at even how the issue of COVID-19 have been responded to, I want to say that there is so much stigma attached to it, to a point that there are some people, there are some people who are opting to lock themselves up, not to speak up, so that they don't go to hospital. And I think this is the first area that we need to start. However, the people that we are with, there is always how we have known a particular individual. And the moment you begin to see some changes, even the way they talk, there are some people who are naturally quiet and reserved, but you realize that all of a sudden they have begun to have what we call, in psychiatric terms, pressure of speech, whereby they are talking and talking and talking. This is something that is very unusual. Others who used to be so talkative and, very outgoing, all of a sudden you realize that they have become reserved. This should be the very, very primary signals that even anybody, doesn't have to be someone who is trained, can be able to observe. Even parents observing even their children, their mannerisms. That is where the lay person can start, observing behaviors, observing mannerism. And if anything that is unusual or something that you feel is not natural for this particular individual, it should be a reason enough for you to begin to find out and to seek help on their behalf.
All right. And Lois, we are at the tail end of this particular segment. Your general advice to the public as we continue to battle the pandemic, which nobody knows when it'll end.
I think I would just want to say that there is a situation we are in. No one was prepared for it. And even as we are moving forward, it still keeps on changing and metamorphosizing into various, into another, even a more difficult and challenging situation. And our shout out is, please reach out to someone. Reach out to someone, because we are currently speaking to people who are in very difficult situations. They are not able to be assisted by anyone else, and unless you just speak. Just reach out to someone. I think that's the best that you can do. And I think there are so many toll-free call numbers, gender-based, particularly the gender-based violence call number, We have got Red Cross call number. We have got certain, so many toll-free numbers that we can be able to call. And perhaps, Mike, that is something that we would really urge you people to just continue, putting on the screens for people to call, call out so that we can mobilize our resources, even though it is a challenging time, but we can mobilize resources and be able to see how someone can get help.
All right, thank you very much. And Kago, your closing remarks?
I want to tell Kenyans, Mike, that the feelings that they are going through at this particular moment, it's a very a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. That is the first place that we need to, the first thing that we need to understand, that my reactions are normal reactions to an abnormal situation. Now, the one thing that a crisis does to an individual is that it obscures, it hinders your ability to see tomorrow, your ability to see possibilities. And all we are telling Kenyans is that it is possible for you again, with the help of someone who is able to walk with you through this journey, to be able to explore yourself again, bring out the much hidden resources in you, because when we are impaired in our way of reasoning, it goes without saying that even our ability to spring forth again becomes hindered, and we tend to feel an overwhelming feeling of loss and hopelessness. So what I want to say is that all is not lost. Even when those businesses close down, salaries have been slashed and people have been sent home, all is not lost. If they are able to speak to someone is able to help them walk through this journey and begin to discover themselves again, begin to discover the much hidden potential in them. Asante.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you for joining us this morning to just have that discussion. That is Moffat Kago, who is a psychologist and also a member of the Kenya Counseling and Psychological Association, and also Lois Okello, who is a psychologist and also a member of the Kenya Counseling and Psychological Association. Thank you for joining us this morning to have that discussion. It's now 8:30. We're going to take a short break, but do stay with us. We have international news coming up on the other side of the break.